In 2011, the BBC announced the discovery in Jordan of a cache of 2,000-year-old metal books, or lead codices. An early intervention into the authenticity of the codices was made by a blogger, Steve Caruso. Claiming expertise in Hebrew and Aramaic, Caruso argued that the lead codices are fakes. How competent is Caruso's analysis? Caruso's first claim is that the lead codices are forgeries because they contain letters that do not exist in Hebrew. The implication is that an authentic scribe would not have used non-existent letters. Therefore, the codex must be the work of a forger. Caruso's second claim is that the codices exhibit an alphabet soup of letters, that is, flipped letters and a mixture of scripts. A genuine scribe would have used letters correctly and consistently used one script. Only an ignorant forger would have mixed up script styles. Third, Caruso points to telltale signs of stamps and molds as evidence that the codices are mass-produced forgeries. A genuine ancient artifact would have been individually crafted. Mass production is a sign that an artifact is a modern forgery. Caruso's final argument is that the codices are fakes because they contain imagery inspired by ancient coins. A genuine artifact would have had original images. Let us consider each of Caruso's claims. Caruso claims some codices contain a letter that is not in Hebrew. It looks like an M in Western script. But a simple survey of ancient artifacts demonstrates that this letter is manifestly Paleo-Hebrew, the letter Tzadeh.
One doesn't have to know Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew to know he's incorrect. One simply must look at the letter that he claims does not exist in either Hebrew or Aramaic and superimpose it on top of several ancient Jewish coins, right, from the First Jewish War period. And you will see that you get a perfect match. Of course it exists. It's the letter Tzadi. And on the coins, it's the first letter of the word for Zion. Right? A word also, by the way, that we find in the Jordanian Lead Books.
Caruso's non-existent letter also appears in earlier times and was demonstrated as long ago as 1910 by Professor Mark Litzbarski, an expert in Semitic philology.
Even going back to the Hasmonean era coins have this form of Sadi. And it's rotated in different ways. Anyone who's studied Paleo-Hebrew or even ancient Jewish coins will know this letter.
I don't think that it's correct for him to say that there are any letters there that are not correct or missing. You would have to look at quite a lot of evidence, I think, to come to that conclusion. But then if you're going to take a view that's as absolute and dogmatic as Caruso's, then you should take the trouble to check your facts.
Caruso also finds suspicious the way the letter Shin appears on the Jordan codices. It is rounded. Caruso is assuming that the letter must be Aramaic. It's true that in older forms of Aramaic script the Shin is usually not rounded. But the letter is not Aramaic, it is Paleo-Hebrew, where it is often rounded. And now this is not to say there might not be a few Aramaic letters in the lead books. That wouldn't be too surprising, since these were found in Jordan, where Nabatean Aramaic was used. And by the way, a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic characters itself wouldn't be proof of forgery, since we could be dealing here with something similar to Qumran esoteric or cryptic scripts that the epigrapher Frank Moore-Cross described as a mixture of Paleo-Hebrew, Jewish and Greek scripts. But the Shin, Caruso points out here, is not Aramaic.
If you're accusing something of being a forgery, then the one thing you'd expect is somebody's doing a forgery, they're going to copy fairly carefully what they're trying to forge, and they wouldn't deliberately make a mistake like that. It's a very curious argument to make. In fact, it almost makes the opposite point that he's trying to make. I think if it was too well written, I might suspect that it was a forgery.
He's assuming that it must be Aramaic. And the Shins in Aramaic are a bit more straight and not nicely rounded and curved as they are in most Paleo-Hebrew instances. So it's nothing odd about it at all if it's Paleo-Hebrew Shin. And since most of the other letters look like Paleo-Hebrew, the burden of evidence would say, well, that's probably Paleo-Hebrew, a typical Paleo-Hebrew Shin.
Caruso then suspects two letters which he thinks might be Coptic rather than Hebrew. In Western script, they look like a Y and an X. In fact, they are not Coptic, but the Hebrew letters Mem and Tav.
A very prestigious Semitic epigrapher once remarked to me that Steve Caruso's Coptic claim there is entirely gratuitous. All one has to do is take out a textbook with Paleo-Hebrew epigraphy tables, look the letters up, and there they are. They're not Coptic to Paleo-Hebrew.
Elsewhere, in a blog post, Caruso claims this letter on the lead book is not Hebrew but Nabatean or Palmyrene monument style. And in yet another blog post, Caruso changes his mind and claims the same letter is now Coptic, the letter Phi. Even if Caruso were correct, and there were some Coptic letters in the lead book, this would not in itself prove the text a fake.
Personally, it wouldn't worry me too much to have a Coptic letter thrown in as well, because if we're talking about, for example, a magical text, then we might well expect letters from a different alphabet.
But Caruso is wrong on both counts. A closer examination of the lead book here shows that Caruso has made a mistake. The so-called Nabatean or Coptic letter is plainly a Paleo-Hebrew rounded He. Examples of which Caruso could have easily found had he done his homework. One can clearly see it's a He in identical form on some Hasmonean coins, which no one disputes are authentic. Caruso next claims this letter on the lead book is a Coptic Gema. But what looks like an open form of Het is attested on known exemplars of Hasmonean coins. These particular coins execute the upper half of Het's right vertical line in a very oblique manner, which makes this portion of the line hardly visible or even lacking. Again, Caruso would have known that had he checked. The irony is that in his forgery blog post, Caruso correctly identifies this letter as a Paleo-Hebrew Het. But he then incorrectly traces an extra line to close the Het, ignorant of the fact that the Het's open form on the lead book is a form found on some Hasmonean coins. He was aware only of Hasmonean coins with closed Het. Finally, Caruso suspects this symbol is not Hebrew but the Coptic letter Lavla. Again, he is mistaken. The letter in fact is the Paleo-Hebrew Dalet. It is a modification of a letter that appears on coins issued in the 2nd century before the Common Era by John Hyrcanus, the Hasmonean ruler. The text on such Hyrcanus coins reads John, High Priest, and the nation of the Jews or Judeans, Vachever HaYehudim. On the basis of a collation of several exemplars of the lead book text Caruso examined, we can reconstruct it more fully as in this artistic depiction. When we take a closer look, we see in the black box the Hyrcanus coin text parallels Vachever and the nation, and in the blue frames spread over 2 lines of text is the parallel to the same coin text HaYehudim of the Jews or Judeans. We now see that Caruso's supposed Coptic letter Lavla and Phi are, As the white and red boxes indicate, in reality the Paleo-Hebrew letters He and Dalet in the word Yehudim. Lastly, in a vertical column of letters beginning above the Mem of Yehudim, there is, cleverly placed, as the yellow box highlights, the letters minus He of the name John, that is, John Hyrcanus. In 1973, the Semitic scholar John Gibson produced a chart of variations in Paleo-Hebrew styles. The Dalet has numerous variations. If we rotate these horizontally, we can see that Caruso's Coptic Lavla is simply a flipped Dalet.
It's quite clear what we're dealing with here. These are Paleo-Hebrew letters, they're not Coptic.
Caruso's second argument against the authenticity of the codices is the presence of flipped letters and the mixture of scripts. In his mind, these are signs of a sloppy, ignorant forger at work. For example, the Hebrew letters Lamed and Gimel appear on the codices flipped. However, a genuine scribe, says Caruso, would have written them thus. Ergo, that makes the codex a forgery. But if we followed Caruso's logic, we would have to declare as fakes numerous artifacts that everyone agrees are genuine, yet contain flipped letters. Take this lead weight from a collection of 3 belonging to the Bar Kokhba period. We find it has several mirror or flipped letters, namely Aleph, Kaf, and Yod. The Aleph should really be this way. The Kaf should really be this way. And the Yod should really be this way. Yet no one says this lead weight is a fake.
All 3 of them have flipped letters, and all 3 of them have variation in their epigraphy, in their paleography, in the style of the individual letters. Because you have to understand, ancient scribes were not using typewriters or laptops to produce their letters. They're not going to conform, right, to each other in every instance. There are going to be slight variations, especially in metal. The scribe or the metal worker is doing everything in reverse, right? So that when something is stamped, right, then it's flipped.
It's unusual, but it's not unknown to have flipped letters. They do exist, and Caruso might have known that, but he obviously didn't. I come back to the point that if one were creating a forgery, then this is the kind of rather simple error that would not be necessary to make. If you're copying ancient symbols and images and so on, then you're copying them. You copy what you see. You don't copy what you don't see.
Caruso also argues that a genuine scribe would have been consistent in the use of script style. Since the Jordan codices exhibit a mixture of scripts and styles, for Caruso this is compelling evidence that the inscriptions were written by a forger. But this table, compiled by Professor Yaakov Meshora, chief curator for archaeology at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, shows the sheer mixture of styles found throughout the epigraphy of the time.
He also has a table for the forms of the Paleo-Hebrew letters on the coins of the First Jewish War. And you can find these types of tables for the Hasmonean coins. And they all show quite marked differences and variation. To someone trained in paleography, it's nothing to think twice about, actually.
In a classic study, James A. Montgomery describes dozens of authentic Semitic language incantation bowls as inscribed with letters arbitrarily arranged. Others again were inscribed by illiterate scribes. Some of the bowls contain self-betraying combinations of letters that suggest a mock inscription. One bowl has the letter Shin placed between words. Others abbreviate and repeat. Others use textual fragments, reverse letter sequences, employ strange sounds such as Omo, possibly from Shema. Often one encounters corrupted forms, words that are spelled badly, mangled names, grammatical and related forms of perversion, texts that are unintelligible, artificial forms, mangled names, and unabashed spelling changes in order to produce rhymes. Montgomery summarizes as follows: the epigraphical evidence is a weak reed to lean on for chronology. Certain evidence from epigraphy is nil. Our texts exhibit eclecticism. Babylonian, Jewish, Mandaic, Gnostic, Hellenistic, and indirectly Egyptian elements are there in various combinations. In short, epigraphic eclecticism is not in itself proof of modern forgery, not in the case of Aramaic magic bowls, and not in the case of the Jordanian Lead Books. A possible objection to the Jordanian metal books' mixed epigraphy would be to invoke the case of the Jehoash inscription, which Christopher Rolston has deftly shown is composed of a script mélange consisting of Aramaic, Paleo-Hebrew, and Phoenician. However, the genre of the Jehoash inscription is fundamentally different from that of the Jordanian metal books, whose texts are not lengthy, straightforward messages about building repairs, but mysterious texts making only occasional and brief straightforward sense, which invites suspicion of esoteric intent, suggesting something more like Qumran cryptic scripts as a closer parallel. Caruso ridicules the Jordanian Lead Books as forgeries because they have been mass-produced by using stamps or molds. But mass production of artifacts was very common in antiquity. This is a stone mold for mass-producing lead amulets. It was found in Sippar, southern Iraq, and dates from the 2nd to 3rd millennium BCE, hardly the age of mass production. And yet the British Museum has no qualms in describing the mold as a genuine portable trinket factory. The Louvre Museum houses this limestone cylinder seal and impression from Mesopotamia, which depicts the worship of the sun god Shamash. It dates to the 2nd millennium BCE. If we accepted Caruso's bizarre logic, we would also have to ridicule these very precious and very authentic objects.
What's the point of making something from a mold? So that you can make more than one. So we're talking about mass production. Yes, mass production is not a modern technique. It didn't come into the world with Henry Ford. A lot of ancient artifacts were mass-produced, cylinder seals being the obvious example. And I would have thought Caruso might have known that, but it seems he didn't.
Caruso believes that the presence in the Jordan codices of images that are also found in ancient coins is evidence of a forger at work. A genuine scribe would have devised original images.
This again is another curious argument. It was not common for people to make up their own images. There was a common stock of images which were known and understood and recognized that conveyed certain sets of meanings. It would not at all be surprising if an ancient wanted to reproduce an image, it's going to reproduce an existing image rather than make up a new one. So what does this point actually mean? Nothing.
When Caruso's claims are subjected to the full glare of a basic knowledge of Paleo-Hebrew, they evaporate, revealing instead non-existent evidence.